Limerence by devdevlin. Read by Ella Mabella. 10. It is not too difficult to get a copy of the prefect timetable from Malfoy. All too eager to impress one of the teachers of his own house, Malfoy hands it over without asking a single question, and with that, Tom knows exactly where he will find an isolated Mr. Weasley. Late that night after dinner, once all of the students are holed up in the dormitories and all of the portraits are quiet in sleep, he makes his way to the third-floor charms corridor and takes his place in the grove of the main classroom doorway. He is not followed. There he waits, patient, silent, a viper in the dark, and while he waits, he thinks of her. Beautiful, beautiful Miss Granger. When he is done tonight, she will not know it, but she will be his. She will be free from the weakness of her attachment, free from obstruction, and when he is done, she will torment him no longer. And so Tom waits, and he waits, and he waits. Tom waits for what feels like hours, and just as he begins to consider whether Weasley has elected to neglect his prefect duties for that evening, the telltale sound of shoe soles dragging on stone, light reflecting from a dimly lit wand. Tom smiles. Then he steps out of the doorway. Shit! Weasley jumps, and Tom is almost pleased in seeing that his classes can't have been a complete waste of time, because he very quickly raises his wand. But then there is recognition, and his wand is back down. Oh! Weasley breathed loudly. Blimey, Professor, I didn't see you. Weasley? It is a good thing the corridor is almost pitch black, for if it were light, Weasley would surely see the excitement in Tom's blown pupils. Prefect duties? Yes. Weasley nods. Sir, 50 more minutes. It's a good night for it, says Tom. Quiet. I trust your rounds have been uneventful. Yeah, found a big old rat, though, by the armor. Weasley gestures back the way he'd come to where the entrance to the armor gallery is. Though it might have been someone's pet, and I tried to catch him, but he took a good bite of my thumb and he got away. Tom frowns as Weasley shows him a small bloodied gash on his thumb. He clears his throat and doesn't comment on it. If you aren't busy, would you mind assisting me for a moment? He asks instead. Downstairs, there's a broken bit of magic in the plumbing of one of the bathrooms. It looks to be an easy fix, but it's one surely in need of 2 hands. Ron seems to need a moment to process what he'd been asked. Well, I'm still just on rounds, and no offense, sir, but Malfoy can be a bit of a git when we don't finish our assigned round, so I think I should. It'll only take a moment. Tom gives a reassuring smile. That's what he'd normally give to his first years. I won't say a thing. Malfoy will be none the wiser. All right, then. Weasley looks uncertain but shrugs. If you think I can help. Tom grins and doesn't hesitate to begin to lead the way back to the stairs. Oh, I am most certain that you can. When the basilisk feeds that night, Tom watches until she is done. She leaves no scrap behind. When Tom wakes the next morning, he does so languidly, leisurely stretching out his muscles one by one, and he feels more relaxed than he has in months. That breakfast passes as most do, slowly, uneventfully, and he makes small talk with Professor Sinistra while he takes his usual coffee and toast with scrambled eggs on the side. He does not see Miss Granger. He is in an excellent mood, and on that morning he gives out more points than he has in the last 3 months put together. His second and third years are most pleased. The weather that morning is bright, and although the grounds are still coated in a thin layer of snow, the sun is out. It is shaping up to be a picturesque day, and it is not until lunchtime that he is quietly pulled aside by Minerva. She brings him into her office and gently tells him that a student has gone missing. She tells him not to panic. She tells him that it is surely not a cause for alarm, not now that Miss Warren's murderer has been caught, that the 2 incidences are certainly unrelated, that 7th year dropping out from their studies before their newts is quite a common occurrence. But she also tells him that to be safe they need to conduct a search, and she tells him that they are searching for Ronald Weasley. Naturally, Tom does all that he can to assist. While Dumbledore and the other professors search the castle, He accompanies Minerva and Severus into the forest to search between the trees, between the roots, in the inside of the caves of the forest's known beasts. Together they search all afternoon and all evening, and they search well into the night. They do not find him. 11. Days pass, and there's no sign of Mr. Weasley. And to Tom, there's no sign of Miss Granger either. With each day that passes without a sight of her, his disappointment in her grows. It grows, and by the time a full week has passed, he begins to wonder whether he will see her again at all before she graduates. It is his own fault, he knows. What he'd done had been reckless. He took one of her comforting shoulders from her, and was foolish enough to leave the other intact. It had been short-sighted of him. He should have taken both. That week Tom uses his sleepless night to think over how he will rectify his misstep. To do so with such little time remaining in the term will be difficult, and more difficult still will be covering it up. One teenage boy disappearing at exam time is one thing, but two close friends disappearing sequentially will make a pattern. Moreover, Potter will be more difficult than Weasley, he knows. Without prefect duties, opportunities to find him alone will be few and far between, and Potter, having been raised by Aurors, has been the best student in his class for 7 years now. It would be much harder to fool Potter than it had been to fool Weasley. But Tom supposes he has always enjoyed a challenge. It is not hard to see that Potter is miserable in the absence of his red-headed friend. Without Weasley by his side, he barely pays attention to his classes, and after dismissing his 7th years for the final time that week, Tom watches the way Potter dawdles out on his own, avoiding conversation with his classmates. That is how he will strike, he decides. He will offer Potter an open ear. He will get him alone and reassure him, comfort him in his time of need, and then, when his guard is down, he will snuff him like a candle. On Saturday evening, Tom sits alone in his classroom. He cannot recall a time in his life where he slept so poorly, and having been busy all day with assisting his students with their nude preparations, by the time the clock strikes 8, the thought alone of making the journey back down to his living quarters in the dungeon makes him groan through his teeth. He considers sleeping there at his desk, but quickly thinks better of it. His neck would never forgive him. Slowly he picks up his desk and tucks his quills into his drawer. He pulls his cloak from the back of his chair and shrugs it on, and just as he stifles a long drawn-out yawn, a timid knock on the classroom door. He rolls his eyes. He doesn't know how many times he needs to explain to Miss Abbott and Miss Bones that his office hours are between 9 and 6, but apparently he will have to do it at least once more. The door cracks open before he can speak, and behind it is not Miss Abbott, and it is not Miss Bones. At the sight of Miss Granger, Tom's lungs empty. "Can I come in?" she asks, even though her head is already in the room, and he swiftly notices the patch of skin under her eyes and around her nostrils are red, raw. He nods. Of course. She slips inside, and when she closes the door behind her, the hairs on his neck begin to prickle with excitement, his tiredness quickly forgotten. "I take you've heard about Ron?" She speaks quietly, and though she did not word it as a question, he nods. "Professor McGonagall and Professor Dumbledore have said it's likely that his classes became too much, and he's decided to leave the school, the way Fred and George did. His family's keeping watch at home, and they're keeping an eye out in the other known communities for any sign of him." Tom stays silent, watching each and every move she makes like a man starved, while she cautiously approaches him. "But I don't." She sighs and puts her back down before she meets his eyes, the action seeming to take some effort. "I don't think that's what happened. If Ron were to have left, he wouldn't have left his things behind. He would have said something, if not to me, then at the very least he would have to Harry." She steps closer, steps only an arm's reach away. It takes every ounce of his self-control not to close it, and the way she's looking at him makes his mouth run dry. "I don't think he ran away," she states. "Then," he says, voice hoarse, "what is it that you think has happened?" Her eyes move, searching him, and he thinks she's focusing on his lips. I think he's dead. When she speaks, it is calmly and with control. And I think it's because of you. At the accusation, he angles his neck, goes to deny it, but then she steps even closer, close enough that her chest is almost brushing his. I saw you. The other day in the courtyard, through the bushes, you were watching us. Her voice is quiet, and as close as they are, Tom has to lean closer still to hear her. I think it made you jealous. I think it made you angry, and I think you did to him what you did to Myrtle. The whites of her eyes are red. She looks as if, like him, she has not slept. There is a lump in his throat, one he cannot seem to swallow down, and it is a strange, uncomfortable sensation, one he can't remember having felt before. You told me once that you wanted me to be honest with you, she whispered. And I was. Now it's your turn. Now I want you to be honest with me. She is so close, so close. Hermione, is he gone? She breathes. Did you do it? I. When he swallows, it is loud. I did it for you. She exhales, then, quickly, shortly, and with it there is a low whimper. But she doesn't falter, she doesn't break. She doesn't even look surprised. As if it is nothing less than she expected, she glances away, licks her lips, and then she nods. Reaches out then, fingers under her chin, and he turns her to force her eye. Are you going to kill me too? He swallows. The mass lodged in his esophagus has grown in size. He shakes his head. But you want to. She's barely whispering now. That's what you said. You'd be glad to see the end of me. No, Don't you know what you're doing to me? Can't you see? He moves his hand to the side of her neck, and she is warm, soft, and fragile. I want to help you. I want to free you. I want to kill the part of you that is holding you back. The part that cared for that boy. The part that keeps you in line, makes you weak. The voice in your head that stops you from being who you're meant to be. The one that tells you no. Her lips are parted. She is frowning, and she is confused, and he thinks this is the moment she will run again. This is the moment she will cry and yell and accuse him of awful things and threaten him with Dumbledore. But then, how would you do it? She whispers, and again he is surprised by her, and he's blinking like a fool. How would you kill it? He actually moans then, because she is extraordinary. Extraordinary, strong, ruthless Miss Granger. I can show you. He leans closer, barely leaving an inch between them. But you have to choose it. You have to want it. She pulls her lip into her mouth, and when her teeth close around it, his breath catches. Show me, she murmurs. He cannot help it. He cannot help the smile that grows on his lips. He cannot help it. He cannot help it. And then he kisses her. She makes a sound low in her throat, and it is hesitant. But she doesn't pull away. She doesn't pull away. She doesn't pull away. And just as he couldn't help kissing her, he doesn't make a conscious decision to push her back against the desk behind her and pull her flush against him. Her small hands tighten around his shirt, and the groans he makes then are rabid. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he knows that what he does mustn't be awful, because when he slides his hand under her t-shirt and up along the line of her waist, under the strap of her bra, she moans into his mouth. And then her legs wrap around his hips, and he's pressing against her, and she's warm and inviting. When she rocks her hips against him, he claws at the desk to stop himself from coming in his pants. And she is so beautiful, and tells her low, lost murmurs he has no control over. Mine, beautiful, extraordinary. The exposed skin of her thighs at the crook of her hips is softer than anything he could have ever imagined. Yet it is nothing compared with the wet heat of her center. With just a touch, it is like a switch. She bucks against him. She bites at his lip. Her fingers pull at the roots of his hair, and the sounds she makes. He will never forget them, not ever, not for as long as he will live, and they are for him, and she is his. His! He is faintly aware of a series of intruding sounds. Footsteps, the sounds of a door opening, but he doesn't stop. He doesn't think he can, until Miss Granger uses both hands to shove his chest back. He sees that her lips are pink, slightly swollen, and she is looking towards the doorway. He follows suit, and there in the doorway, like a bucket of ice water, is Dumbledore. He storms toward them in a fury, and he is not alone. There's a small crowd behind him, 4, maybe 5 others. They are all in a similar dark uniform, and they all have their wands raised, and Miss Granger, she does not look surprised to see them. She does not look surprised to see them. She is smiling. Hermione! She looks at him then, and no longer is she calm. She wipes her lip with the back of her hand, a show of wiping him away, and she is incandescent. "You will pay for what you've done," she hisses, and while she says it, the man advances, yet it is her he cannot look away from. "For the rest of your years, you will rot." He sees the pieces then. They are all there in front of him. He sees them, and yet he cannot put them together. He cannot do a thing, for he is failing. His stomach is plummeting the way it had the first time he'd slid down the pipe into the chamber, and he very nearly comes then and there in front of all of them at the sight of her. Because she is incensed, and she's not holding back any more. Marvelous, magnificent, ruthless Miss Granger. She's free, and he doesn't fight it when the Aurors pull him away, or when they bind his wrists behind his back. He doesn't argue or yell when he hears Miss Granger say, "I have the confession, Professor," because all the while he cannot take his eyes off of her. She's wild, unleashed. She's uncontained, at last, and it is because of him. She's extraordinary, and she's the last thing he sees. To be continued. Thank you for listening to today's chapter of Limerence by devdevlin, read by Alex Mabella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, AO3, Instagram, or Tumblr.